Eleanor Vance, a biotech director whose life was as meticulously ordered as her spreadsheets, had just settled into her conference hotel when her phone buzzed with a message from Lena. A familiar chill snaked down her spine. Her younger sister's texts usually brought pleas for money, never news. But this message was different. "Hey sis. Marcus and I moved into your Portland place. You won't mind, just borrowing for a bit." Eleanor stared at the screen, her cherished home, her sanctuary, instantly transformed into a battlefield. Eleanor Vance, a woman whose life was a testament to meticulous planning and earned success, stared at the glowing rectangle in her hand. "OMG, sis. Marcus and I moved into your Portland place. You won't mind, just borrowing for a bit." The words felt like a physical blow, rattling the composure she usually wore like a second skin. Her cherished Portland home, the meticulously designed haven she'd poured her soul and savings into, wasn't just a house, it was her sanctuary. The physical manifestation of her hard-won independence after years of escaping the shadow of her entitled younger sister. She was halfway across the country, just hours into a 3-week biotech conference, when Lena's brazen message arrived. A cold dread coiled in Eleanor's stomach, quickly morphing into a familiar, seething anger. This wasn't the first time Lena had blurred boundaries, but this was an outright invasion. Her thumb hovered over the call button, then slammed down. Lena, predictably, didn't answer. A flurry of texts followed, each more terse and demanding, yet still, only silence. Eleanor knew she needed eyes on the ground. She called Arthur Finch, her retired next-door neighbor, a man whose quiet vigilance was a comforting presence. His voice, usually calm, held a tremor of concern. "Eleanor? Yes, I've seen them. Lena and that Marcus fellow. They've been here since yesterday. Moving things out. Looks like they're making themselves quite at home. I even saw them dragging your old gardening bench out to the curb. Said they needed space for some new decor." The gardening bench. Her grandmother's, lovingly restored. A sharp gasp escaped Eleanor's lips, a precursor to the fury bubbling within. "Arthur, did they force their way in? Did you see how they entered?" "No, dear. Lena had a key. Just walked right in. She said you'd given it to her for emergencies months ago, and this was an emergency of sorts. Said you wouldn't mind them staying while you're away. I must admit, it seemed a bit off. A key. The spare she'd reluctantly given Lena last year when Lena had claimed she'd lost her own apartment keys and needed a temporary refuge from a crisis that turned out to be pure fabrication. A strategic error, a moment of weakness, now weaponized. It wasn't forced entry, it was a calculated act of deception and betrayal, leveraging a moment of Eleanor's misplaced familial trust. The conversation with a lawyer confirmed her worst fears. Without proof of forced entry, Ms. Vance, and if they establish residency, even briefly, Oregon's tenant protection laws can make this incredibly complex. We might be looking at an eviction process, which isn't quick. The words hung in the air, heavy with bureaucratic impedance. An eviction? In her own home? The injustice of it was a bitter taste. Eleanor paced her sterile hotel room, the city lights outside a blur. Her meticulous life, so carefully constructed, was unraveling at the seams, not by an external threat, but by the insidious actions of her own sister. Lena and Marcus, parasites by nature, had found their way in, not through a shattered window, but through a crack of misplaced empathy. Her initial shock gave way to an icy resolve. This wasn't just about property, it was about reclaiming her peace, her boundaries, and the very sanctuary Lena had defiled. A burgeoning rage simmered, a quiet promise that this time Lena had gone too far. The legal delays were a slow-burning fuse. Each call with her lawyer, each patiently explained bureaucratic hurdle, chipped away at Eleanor's remaining professional composure. The notion of due process felt like a cruel joke when her home, her sanctuary, was actively being desecrated. She was in a sterile conference room, presenting on advanced biosecurity protocols, while her mind replayed Arthur's breathless reports, images of Lena's brazen entitlement unfolding back in Portland. The chasm between her highly ordered, rational professional life and the chaotic, Emotional invasion of her personal one grew wider with every passing hour. Frustration coiled in her gut, a sour, indigestible ball. Then came the photos from Arthur. A gallery of calculated insults. Lena, lounging on Eleanor's cream-colored sofa, feet propped on the antique coffee table Eleanor had inherited from her grandmother, a half-eaten bag of chips spilling crumbs onto the fabric. Marcus, laughing, holding one of Eleanor's treasured first-edition novels open-faced on a spilled drink ring, seemingly oblivious. A blurred shot of Eleanor's carefully curated collection of botanical prints now replaced by cheap, garish band posters. But it was the image of the antique dining table, scarred by what looked like knife marks, piled high with takeout containers, that truly pierced her. It wasn't just careless, it was contemptuous. It was Lena declaring ownership not just of the space, but of Eleanor's very identity. Eleanor's initial fury, a raw, hot blaze, began to cool into something far more dangerous. The police had confirmed what her lawyer had dreaded: no forced entry. Lena had used the spare key Eleanor had, in a moment of naive familial trust years ago, entrusted to her. It wasn't a break-in, it was a betrayal from within, a calculated, premeditated act of invasion using the very tools of love and trust Eleanor had offered. The realization solidified. This wasn't Lena being irresponsible, this was Lena being malicious. Her sister hadn't just taken advantage, she had orchestrated a hostile takeover. The pristine lines of Eleanor's professional life, her meticulously planned schedule, her entire career trajectory, suddenly seemed flimsy, inconsequential. This invasion wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a wound, deep and festering. All the carefully constructed boundaries, the years of building an independent life free from Lena's parasitic whims, had been summarily dismantled. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize within her. The Eleanor who extended olive branches, who believed in second chances, vanished. In her place emerged a woman stripped bare of illusion, fueled by a singular, unyielding purpose: justice. Not just eviction, but ruthless justice. Her flight back to Portland, abruptly booked, felt less like a journey and more like a deployment. She would not return to a ruined home to lick her wounds, she would return to wage war. The no-mercy approach wasn't a threat, it was a promise she made to herself, etched into the very core of her being. Lena and Marcus had opened a door they could not close, and Eleanor would ensure they walked through it to face every consequence. The chill of the Portland evening bit at Eleanor's face, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread coiling in her gut as she turned the key. The air inside her home, once a sanctuary of clean lines and subtle lavender, now reeked of stale fast food, cheap cologne, and an indefinable scent of neglect. Her meticulously curated entry table, usually adorned with a single orchid, was buried under a pile of discarded flyers, greasy takeaway containers, and Marcus's grimy baseball cap. A sickening lurch twisted in her stomach. She walked deeper, each step a descent into a nightmare. Her minimalist living room, designed for quiet contemplation, was transformed into a chaotic den of mismatched blankets, overflowing ashtrays, despite her strict no-smoking rule, and what looked like a discarded pizza crust matted into her ivory rug. But it was the dining room that truly broke her. Her grandmother's antique mahogany dining table, a family heirloom, the very centerpiece of countless cherished memories, was covered in scorch marks from carelessly placed hot pans. One leg had a fresh, jagged gouge, as if someone had dragged something heavy across it without a care in the world. Next to it, a cheap plastic bin overflowed with Eleanor's collected literary journals, now stained with what looked suspiciously like soda. A wave of profound grief, sharp and physical, washed over her, quickly followed by a cold, searing rage that settled deep in her bones. This wasn't just an invasion, it was an act of deliberate desecration. Every inch of her home screamed of disrespect, of entitlement, of a profound disregard for her life, her history, and her very being. Just then, the front door swung open with a bang. Lena and Marcus strolled in, arms laden with shopping bags, a careless, almost celebratory air about them. Lena, still in the stained hoodie she'd worn for days, paused mid-laugh, her eyes widening as they landed on Eleanor. Marcus, ever the opportunist, started to drone. Hey, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Just in time. We were thinking of ordering pizza. You should really try them. His voice died as he caught the expression on Eleanor's face. Eleanor stood perfectly still, a terrifying calm radiating from her. Her voice, when it came, was a low, steady current, devoid of the tremor she felt beneath the surface. Lena. Marcus. She held up 2 sealed envelopes. These are for you. Eleanor remained unmoved, her gaze unwavering. Your key was revoked the moment you crossed the line from guest to occupier without my permission. My lawyer has ensured that every detail has been handled according to the law. My mother's opinion is irrelevant to the criminal damage you've inflicted upon my property and the blatant betrayal of my trust. You have 1 hour. Marcus, who had been shifting uneasily, his usual swagger replaced by a sickly pallor, finally spoke, his voice unusually subdued. Lena, she's not kidding. That's a real eviction notice. And a restraining order. She went through a lawyer. He grabbed Lena's arm, his eyes starting towards the door. We need to go. Now. But where will we go? Lena whined, her manipulation turning to pure victimhood. You can't just throw us out on the street. This is cruel, Eleanor. After everything I've done for you. Eleanor simply raised a single, unreadable eyebrow. The clock is ticking. Seeing the unyielding resolve in Eleanor's eyes and feeling Marcus's urgent tug, Lena finally, grudgingly, began to pack. The next hour was a blur of slammed doors, muffled curses, and the scraping of cheap luggage across Eleanor's hardwood floors. When the last of their bags was hauled out, when the front door finally clicked shut, the silence that fell over the house was heavier, colder, more profound than any peace Eleanor had ever known. The invaders were gone, but their presence lingered in every stain, every broken object, every lingering scent of their careless disregard. The scars were deep, a permanent reminder of the price of her misplaced trust. Eleanor stood in the center of her defiled home, not defeated, but reforged. The grief was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a fierce, unyielding determination to see justice done. This was only the beginning. The sterile hum of the Portland courthouse could not quell the tempest brewing within Eleanor, though her exterior remained a study in meticulous composure. She sat upright, a sentinel of resolve, her gaze fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge Lena and Marcus, who slouched on the opposing bench. Lena, pale and drawn, kept glancing nervously at Marcus, whose usual swagger had deflated into a restless fidgeting. They had tried to dress for the occasion, but their ill-fitting suits only highlighted their disarray. Later that evening, as the last echoes of the court's judgment faded, Eleanor received a call from her mother, Sylvie. Eleanor, how could you do this to your own sister? Family sticks together. Lena is devastated. She doesn't deserve this. Can't you just drop some of the charges? She's your sister. The familiar, guilt-laden tone grated against Eleanor's freshly hardened resolve. She listened, her hand gripping the phone, before speaking with a voice devoid of emotion. Mother, this isn't about family. It's about consequences and boundaries. I'm drawing a line. If you can't respect that, then I can't have you in my life either. She hung up, a profound silence filling her home, heavier than any damage, yet cleaner. The severance was painful, but necessary, reinforcing her unwavering commitment to justice, even if it meant sacrificing the illusion of family harmony. Her path was clear, and she would walk it alone if she had to. Eleanor, despite the immediate legal victory and the symbolic severing of ties with her mother, felt a visceral tension that refused to dissipate. She knew Lena's entitlement ran deeper than a simple desire for a temporary roof over her head. Her intuition, finely tuned by years of Lena's manipulative patterns, proved prescient. The first tangible challenge arose not from a direct confrontation, but from a polite, almost apologetic call from an HR department in Seattle. The caller was inquiring about Alina Vance, who had listed Eleanor as a professional reference for a senior management position, citing a long-standing professional mentorship. The audacity of it sent a cold spike of fury through Eleanor. Not only was Lena woefully unqualified for such a role, but she had dared to leverage Eleanor's meticulously built reputation, a foundation of integrity and hard work, as a stepping stone for her own deceit. Eleanor, her voice a calm, controlled instrument of steel, informed the HR manager that Lena Vance had no authorization to use her name, nor was there any professional mentorship. She explicitly stated that any claims of professional association were fraudulent and advised them to verify all other credentials rigorously. The manager's polite apology and assurance of further investigation did little to quell the simmering rage within Eleanor. Barely an hour later, the inevitable call from Sylvie, her mother, came. Her voice was a familiar blend of feigned helplessness and thinly veiled accusation, a potent cocktail designed to induce guilt. "Eleanor, how could you? Lena just called me, utterly distraught. She said you ruined her job interview. She needs this, honey. We're family. Can't you just let this go? She's trying to turn her life around." Eleanor listened, her jaw tight, a familiar ache blooming in her chest, quickly stifled by resolve. "Mother," she interjected, her tone devoid of warmth, "Lena committed fraud. She used my name without permission to secure employment she is entirely unqualified for. There is no turning around when one continues to lie and exploit. This isn't about family, it's about consequences. And if you continue to enable her, you leave me no choice but to distance myself from you as well." The resulting silence on the other end was a small, hollow victory, quickly followed by the click of Eleanor ending the call. A profound sense of isolation settled over her, swiftly replaced by an unyielding resolve. This fresh betrayal solidified Eleanor's decision to leave no stone unturned. She contacted Ms. Davies, the private investigator recommended by her lawyer, a woman known for her discretion and tenacity. Eleanor tasked her with one goal: uncover the full extent of Lena's deceptive patterns, particularly her professional fabrications. Days later, Ms. Davies' report arrived in Eleanor's inbox, a chilling dossier that meticulously detailed Lena's manipulative history. It documented multiple instances where Lena had fabricated employment history, exaggerated qualifications, and, most damningly, used Eleanor's name and even forged signatures for reference letters on various job applications across the country. Each application was a house of cards, built precariously on Eleanor's hard-won credibility. Eleanor's legal team, armed with the PI's irrefutable findings, moved swiftly and decisively. Cease and desist letters were dispatched to every company Lena had approached, explicitly stating the fraudulent use of Eleanor Vance's name and professional standing. The letters were unequivocal, warning of severe legal action should Lena continue her deceptive practices. Simultaneously, Eleanor's lawyers proactively contacted several prominent firms in the biotech sector, where Eleanor held considerable influence, to discreetly inform them of Lena Vance's fraudulent activities. The professional world was a tight-knit community. This strategic move effectively blacklisted Lena from any legitimate opportunities within their network. The net was closing, and Lena's options for exploitation were rapidly dwindling. It was during one of Ms. Davies' follow-up visits, as she meticulously documented the remaining damage to Eleanor's property for insurance and restitution claims, that an unexpected discovery was made. While inspecting the detached garage, which had once housed Eleanor's gardening tools and emergency supplies, Ms. Davies noted a peculiar setup. Hidden beneath tarps and old boxes were stacks of electronic components, partially disassembled laptops, circuit boards, and soldering equipment. There was a faint but distinct smell of flux and burnt plastic. Further investigation revealed a crude inventory list and shipping labels for Thorne refurbishments, bearing Marcus Thorne's name and an obscure online storefront. It was clear Marcus had been running an undeclared side business, using Eleanor's garage as his workshop and storage facility, completely off the books. This was not just a violation of the restraining order, it was tax fraud. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and cold. She instructed her legal team to prepare a detailed report, complete with Ms. Davies' photographic evidence and the inventory lists, and to submit it anonymously to the Internal Revenue Service and the state tax authorities. This wasn't merely about getting even, it was about ensuring that every transgression, every act of disrespect and exploitation met its full and unyielding consequence. Lena and Marcus had not just invaded her home, they had attempted to leech off her reputation and evade their civic duties under her roof. Eleanor Vance, once a woman of quiet compassion, had been forged in the crucible of betrayal into an unyielding arbiter of justice. This was no longer just about her house, it was about setting a precedent for those who believed they could take without paying the price. The storm was far from over. The storm, as Eleanor had predicted, was far from over. It raged first around Marcus Thorne. The detailed report Eleanor had filed regarding his undeclared electronics business from her garage had triggered a swift and relentless investigation by the IRS. Receipts, shipping labels, and customer testimonials, painstakingly gathered by her private investigator, painted a clear picture of systematic tax evasion. Marcus, high-strung and ill-equipped for legal battles, crumbled under the pressure. The court proceedings were swift and brutal, a stark contrast to the drawn-out civil disputes. He pleaded guilty, his face ashen, to avoid a harsher sentence. The judge, making an example of his parasitic lifestyle, handed down a sentence of 2 years probation, a hefty fine that dwarfed anything he'd ever earned, and, most damningly, a permanent criminal record that would forever brand him as untrustworthy. His dreams of any legitimate venture, already flimsy, shattered irrevocably. While Marcus was grappling with the cold reality of the justice system, Lena, ever the opportunist, sought a different escape route. The mounting restitution order, coupled with her complete inability to secure gainful employment thanks in no small part to Eleanor's proactive notifications to potential employers, pushed her to desperation. She filed for bankruptcy, a gambit she hoped would wipe clean the slate of her financial misdeeds and allow her to re-emerge unburdened from the ashes of her own making. It was a familiar pattern: avoid responsibility, declare victimhood, and expect a fresh start. But Eleanor had anticipated this. Her legal team, spearheaded by the same tenacious lawyer who'd secured her initial victories, was ready. They moved to contest the bankruptcy, presenting a mountain of evidence that meticulously documented Lena's malicious and willful actions. They laid bare the premeditated nature of the home invasion, the deliberate destruction of property, the callous sale of heirlooms, and the blatant disregard for Eleanor's ownership. Lena's incriminating texts, Arthur Finch's unwavering testimony, the police reports detailing the damage, all contributed to a portrait of intentional malice, not mere financial misfortune. In a somber courtroom, stripped of the melodrama Lena typically employed, Judge Isabella Ross listened intently. When the verdict came, it was a hammer blow. The judge ruled that the debts Lena owed to Eleanor were non-dischargeable under bankruptcy law, citing the clear evidence of willful and malicious injury to property. The ruling meant there would be no clean slate, no easy escape. Lena and Marcus now faced years, perhaps decades, of garnished wages, asset seizures, and an inescapable financial ruin that would follow them like a shadow. The weight of these escalating consequences proved too much for their already frayed relationship. Marcus, his usual bluster replaced by sullen resentment, blamed Lena for everything. Lena, in turn, found his perpetual irresponsibility and growing criminal taint an intolerable burden, no longer offering the illusion of an easy life. One stormy evening, after another acrimonious argument fueled by a summons for Marcus's unpaid fines, Lena finally snapped. She packed a small bag, leaving Marcus in the squalor of their rented room, the silence between them heavier than any shouted accusation. It was an end to their codependent charade, a final unraveling brought about by the inescapable accountability Eleanor had so determinately pursued. Their futures, once vaguely optimistic despite their sloth, were now permanently altered, defined by court orders, financial shackles, and the bitter taste of consequences. Eleanor, though weary, felt a profound, albeit cold, sense of justice. She had ensured her betrayers would confront the full, inescapable weight of their choices. Months had passed since the court rulings, since Lena and Marcus had vanished from her immediate orbit, leaving behind not just financial devastation but also a profound, unsettling quiet. Eleanor's Portland home, meticulously restored to its former glory, hummed with a different kind of peace now, a hard-won stillness. The scent of freshly polished wood had replaced the lingering stench of disrespect. Her grandmother's antique dining table, miraculously recovered and painstakingly repaired, once again occupied its place of honor, a silent testament to enduring resilience. Yet, even as the physical scars faded, Eleanor knew the emotional cost had been immense. Every legal battle, every confrontation, had chiseled away a piece of her former self, replacing it with a steely resolve she hadn't known she possessed. She reflected on the journey, acknowledging the exhaustion, the grief for a lost sisterly bond, but also the undeniable surge of strength that had carried her through. One rainy afternoon, while archiving old digital files, Eleanor stumbled upon a folder labeled Lena. Within it, among a flurry of furious texts and damning photos, was a single, long-deleted voicemail. She hadn't listened to it then, too consumed by righteous fury. Now, a strange impulse guided her finger to play. Lena's voice, raw and broken, filled the quiet study. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say. It's all gone. Everything. Marcus, he's gone too. And it's my fault. I messed up. I really, truly messed up this time. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry." The apology was choked with tears, tinged with the familiar self-pity, yet beneath it, Eleanor discerned something else, a genuine tremor of defeat, perhaps even a nascent spark of remorse. It wasn't the cunning manipulation she'd grown accustomed to, but the hollow sound of a life finally hitting rock bottom. Eleanor paused, her gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. Her initial instinct was to delete it again, to let Lena wallow in the bed she'd made. But a different thought surfaced, one not rooted in vengeance, but in a more complex understanding of justice and growth. Justice, she realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was also about accountability and, perhaps, the possibility of a different path forward for the offender. If Lena was truly broken, truly sorry, could there be a sliver of hope for change? Not for their relationship, not for a return to the past, but for Lena as a person. She contacted her lawyer, not to escalate, but to explore an alternative. Weeks later, Lena received a revised restitution plan. It was still demanding, still ironclad, requiring consistent payments over an extended period, proof of employment, and mandatory therapy sessions. But it offered a conditional path to forgiveness, a structured way for Lena to atone, not just financially, but emotionally, by actively working towards self-improvement. There would be no direct contact with Eleanor, no sentimental reconciliation, but an opportunity to rebuild her own life on honest foundations, proving her remorse through action rather than words. To Eleanor's quiet surprise, Lena accepted. The first few payments were meager, but they were consistent. Reports from a therapist, relayed through legal channels, indicated Lena was engaging, slowly confronting her patterns of entitlement and avoidance. Eleanor knew it was a long road, perhaps an impossible one, for Lena to truly change, and she harbored no illusions of a sisterly reunion. But Lena's acceptance and initial adherence to the plan offered a measure of closure that pure retribution hadn't. Eleanor Vance found a deeper, more enduring peace in her reclaimed boundaries and self-worth. Her home was her sanctuary once more, protected by the vigilance she had earned. Her story, a testament to harsh lessons, concluded not with an embrace, but with a quiet affirmation: some boundaries are non-negotiable, some consequences are inescapable. And true self-preservation sometimes demands the difficult act of holding others, even family, accountable for their choices. It was a cold peace, perhaps, but it was profoundly her own.